So what can we do postpartum? We can increase, on one side, offering a glucogenic source. So we want to provide glucose for that follicle to grow. That really works. The problem with this type of diets is that we're already doing that. Our milking diets are very high in carbohydrates, and we can put a little bit more carbohydrate if we want, attempting to increase reproduction, but we have to be careful, because if, as a result of the increase of carbohydrates in our diet, we produce more propionate in the rumen. Propionate causes hypophagia, and it decreases intake. So then it's the last thing I want to do in a dairy cow, right? If I compromise intake, I compromise energy consumption, and then I'm going to have less milk production and more reproductive problems. So we have to be careful of how much carbohydrates we can put in the diet. The other problem we might run into, if we increase further our carbohydrates, is that we can have rumen acidosis. So it's not a real option that we can play with. We're usually around 42% carbohydrates in our diet, non-fiber carbohydrates. We cannot go much higher than that. So it's, yes, it works, but we have a limitation. This study shows very nicely also that what's important, and that's a very common mistake that we do in the field, we pay attention to percentages instead of amounts. What the cow needs is kilos of starch, kilos of glucose to sustain reproduction and milk production. She doesn't care about percentage. I can feed a ration with 23% starch or 27% starch and get exactly the same result. If my cow, consuming 27% dry matter, now she consumes less intake. Instead of consuming 24 kilos, she goes and eats 22. Then I'm providing the same amount of kilos of starch than in this diet. So we really need to look at how much the animals are eating and then what's my nutrient supply in kilos, not in percentage. An effective way to provide glucose or glucogenic precursors to these cows post-calving is propylene glycol. Propylene glycol, it's a little bit tedious to feed because you have to do it on a cow basis and you have to do it orally. But nowadays we have technology that's relatively affordable. You can take a blood sample of your animals after calving at day 3 or day 5, and if the BHBA content in blood is below 1.2 millimolar, then you go and infuse 300 milliliters to the cow, and that will provide glucose to the animal, minimize ketosis, and also improve reproduction. Nowadays you can do that for less than €1 an animal, okay? The blood testing on farm. One more approach that has been proposed, and this actually works, is feeding CLA, conjugated linoleic acid. CLA is a special fatty acid that has 2 double bonds, but they are conjugated, so there is 1 carbon apart. And this is what happens when you feed CLA. If you feed CLA, this is butter fat. When you feed this type of CLA, 10-12, there is a very dramatic decrease in milk fat production, which means a very nice improvement in the net energy balance of these animals. Okay, the less fat you put in milk, the more energy you have for other things. And there are actually studies that demonstrate that, yes, when you feed CLA and reduce butter fat in milk, you improve reproduction. Now, CLA is quite costly, and it has to be rumen protected. And there are alternatives that are a little bit more affordable, like soybean oil. Soybean oil will also provide a source of CLA because it will be fermented in the rumen, not fermented, but biohydrogenated, and will be a source of CLA post-ruminally.